Hey guys, it's Austin with Out Jeeping. In today's how-to, I'm going to be showing how to replace a water pump in your Jeep 4.0. Along with that, I'm going to be replacing the thermostat, so you get to see how that works too. So, let's get started. Alright, so now that we're under the hood, as you can see, right behind this pulley down here is the actual water pump. The reason why I'm replacing mine is you can see it's a little bit wet in between the engine and the water pump. And so basically the gasket just went out on mine, and instead of just replacing the gasket, I'm going to replace the water pump while I'm at it. So some things we need to do to take out the water pump is we have to take off the whole belt system here. And we're going to have to remove this electric fan. That way we can take the tension off the belt. Alright, so first thing I'm going to do is remove this electric fan. We got a power connection right here, and then we have two 5/16 screws going in on the top, and then the bottom should just slip out. Alright, now we can just pull off this overflow line from the radiator. Let's move it out of the way for now. Then we have a connection. And then electric fan should just pull right out. Like so. Alright, so now before I remove the serpentine belt, I'm actually going to break these 4 bolts free on the water pump pulley. That way it's going to be easier to get off because it'll have a little bit of resistance with the belt still on there. So to do that, I'm just taking a 1/2 inch ratchet and breaking them free. Alright, so now to loosen up the serpentine belt, we are going to break this nut free down here, which is going to be a 15mm. And then we can undo the tension with this bolt that's hiding behind here, and that's also going to be a 15mm. If you want to make this go easier, I suggest putting some penetrating lubricant on this rod that's threaded in right underneath the power steering pump. Now we should be able to pull off the belt. Just have that set out of the way for now. Next thing is we can take this pulley off the water pump. Now that we have these bolts broken free, we can should be able to take them out by hand. And hopefully not drop them. Alright, so now, as you can see, pulley's still kind of on there. You might have to take like a hammer or something just to knock it free because it's made with that water pump surface. There we go. One other thing I forgot to mention, if you don't have enough room to be able to work and get around on getting the water pump out, you can also remove this mechanical fan shrouding right here. I'm going to have to take it out anyway because I have to remove this thermostat housing. So I'm going to go ahead and do that right now. Again, it's just going to be 2 5/16 bolts right on top here. So before I start taking off everything, I'm going to go and drain the whole entire cooling system. The fastest way to do it basically is to remove the lower radiator hose from the water pump. So to do that, there's going to be a little hose clamp down here. Basically just loosen that up and you can pull off the hose. Make sure you have like a bucket or something underneath to catch all the coolant. You don't want that stuff spilling all over and getting into the environment because it's really dangerous stuff. So just make sure you have a bucket right underneath. Alright, with that hose clamp off, we should be able to pop this off. Alright, so like I said before, I'm going to be replacing the thermostat along with a new thermostat housing while I'm at it. And since it's right here, we're going to take that off first. To do that, we got two coolant lines, and they're just going to be simple hose connectors. If your Jeep never had its coolant hoses replaced before, it probably has some factory clamps on there, and those you can take off with a simple pliers. Just basically crimp them in and push them back. These are a little bit easier. You can either take a flathead screwdriver or a socket to get these off. Then we can just simply undo this plastic connector. That's for your temperature switch. And then I believe we have two bolts holding on this thermostat housing. But before I take those bolts off, I'm going to actually take this out. Since I have a new housing, it's just going to be easier to remove this when it's already attached to the engine. In case you're wondering, this temperature sensor is going to be a 3/4. Alright, so the two bolts holding in this thermostat housing are also going to be a 1/2 inch. Alright, then right here is actually our thermostat. Pops out like that. Alright, with that out of the way, there's one more coolant line we have to disconnect, and that's going to be over here on the left side of the engine. It's attached to this metal pipe that goes all the way down into the water pump. So we're just going to disconnect it here with another hose clamp. Push those out of the way for now. So now we can actually unbolt the water pump from the engine. There's going to be a total of 4 bolts that bolt it into the engine block, and those are going to be a 1/2 inch. There's going to be one here, and then 2 underneath, which are going to be a little bit difficult to get to. And then we also have 2 bolts that are connected to this bracket for the power steering pump and belt tensioner. Those are going to be 2 9/16 bolts. So I'm first going to start off with the 9/16 bolts right here. And then another one down here. This one you need an extension because the ratchet actually hits the idler pulley. Then we can get the 1/2 inch bolts. Start with one on top. Now I believe a couple of these bolts are going to be different lengths, so make sure you know which one goes where. Once again, make sure you have a bucket underneath. As you can see, there's still some more coolant in the engine that's leaking out. But now, should be able to slide it out like that. Alright, so with the old water pump out, we can go and clean off the surfaces here where our thermostat housing and water pump were. We want to make sure that's nice and clean for the new gasket to seal. And if you are reusing this metal tube that goes to the heater core, you want to remove that now and then reinstall on your new pump before you put it in. And you want to make sure it's facing the right way, so when it's against the engine that it's facing back towards the engine. You won't have any room to adjust it at all when this is mounted to the engine, so you want to make sure you get that right. And in my case, I'm actually replacing this tube with a brand new one. It was pretty cheap, so I'm replacing that as well since it's all rusty. Now before I go ahead and start removing this gasket, I'm actually going to flush the entire cooling system with basically just a garden hose. now is the best time to do it since you don't have any restriction with the thermostat. Normally if you have the thermostat on and you try to flush it out, water can't flow in and out of here because, you know, it's not hot enough. But with that off and with the water pump off, it's easy to flush everything out and get all the crud out that's accumulated all around this water pump. That's going to help clean it out and make sure that there's no dirt in between the gasket when you put the new water pump on. So I'm just going to roll this out of the garage real quick and flush it out. Alright, so if you don't know how to flush your cooling system, there's many videos online, but basically I'm going to be just running some hose water through all the heater lines, going back and forth trying to get all the crud out and everything like that. Along with it, I'm going to be cleaning around here where all the gasket's going, because there seems to be a lot of crud where the timing cover is. I just want to make sure everything gets nice and clean before I put on the new gasket. Alright, so as I flush it a little bit, we can go and get these surfaces cleaned. I like to do it with just a wire brush on a drill. It makes it really fast. You can also use any scrapers to get any of the chunks off, really anything to clean the surface. Just make sure not to damage or groove it at all, otherwise you won't have a good sealing surface. So I'm just going to be using this drill right here, and I'm not going to press too hard. You just want to make sure you get all the old gasket off. You don't want to ruin the metal at all. Alright, so here we have the old and new water pump. Once again, if you're reusing this piece of piping right here, you're going to want to remove it from the old water pump and put it into the new one. When you do that, you want to make sure you seal up these threads right here. And to do that, they have Teflon tape or whatever you can use. Since I'm going to be using this new pipe I ordered, they already have some sealer already on the thread, so I don't have to worry about putting any Teflon tape on there. So for this one, all I got to do is just thread it in. Then I want to make sure once this gets tightened down, it points in the same direction as it was on the old pump, as you can see here. Alright, so after I took a wire brush and scraper to the old gasket, I took a rag with some acetone and cleaned off this whole surface area. And so now we can reinstall our new water pump, and basically it comes with a new gasket right here. It only goes on one way, so I'm going to sit that right on top of here and fish in the new water pump. To make it a little bit easier to install, I'm actually going to take a couple bolts just to hold the gasket in place. So just put it like halfway in. Now we can take the rest of the bolts and put them in about finger tight. Alright, so once you have all 4 of the 1/2-inch bolts for the water pump in, you can start to tighten it up with a ratchet. I would suggest doing it in a crossword pattern. That way the gasket seats properly and you won't have any leaks. Once you go and get everything nice and snug, you can go and torque it down to 23 foot-pounds. Alright, now we can take our 2 9/16 bolts and throw them back in. Alright, so here we have our new thermostat. You have to be very careful when you install this. There should be a little point on here where it shows where to go up. Sometimes there's actually a hole, and you want to make sure that hole points straight up. So then we're just going to fit it in like this. You want to make sure it locks into that ridge right there. Now a lot of times what could happen, which is not good, is you'll have this where it fall down, and when you go and put the housing back on, you tighten it up, you'll actually crack the housing. So you want to make sure you really know that this is locked into place. So now we're going to take the housing along with the new gasket. Just going to set it on like that. Then we're going to take our bolts again, just to help us so we don't lose the gasket. Just have it hold in like that. It seems like it's already flat on there. Now we're just going to take our wrench and tighten it up. Now I went and put some new Teflon tape on this temperature sensor, so now we can reinstall it back into the housing. Right there is nice and tight. Let's plug that guy back in. Now we can start reconnecting our hoses. Alright, so now I'm going to take the pulley and put it back in the water pump and line up the holes. So for right now, I want to basically just put these bolts in as tight as I can by my hands, and once I get the serpentine belt back on, I can go and tighten them up with a wrench. That way there will be some tension so that the pulley just doesn't slip around. So now let's go put the belt back on. Once you get the belt routed back on, we can go and start tightening it back up. Alright, so now with this belt nice and tight, we can go and tighten these up on the water pump pulley. Alright, now we can put our fan shrouds back in. Then we can get our electrical connections and pull them back in. Alright, so the last thing we have to do is top it off with coolant. You want to make sure you have a 50-50 mixture with water and antifreeze. So we're going to top that off, and then we're actually going to run the engine. That way it burps out any of the water that's trapped in the system. Then we're going to top off the reservoir, and if there's still any air left in the system, as you keep driving, it's going to naturally burp out the system. That's what the overflow bottle is for. And make sure the water that you're mixing in with this is going to be distilled water. Alright, so now we have it to where the coolant's topped off in the radiator cap. So now we're going to go and start up the Jeep, and as it cycles, it should cycle more air out, and then we're going to keep on filling it up with coolant. Alright guys, we're all done. It was a pretty smooth install overall. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you have any questions, make sure to comment below and I'll be happy to answer. Also, check out the Out Jeeping YouTube channel and like and subscribe this video if it helped you. So, until next time, we'll see you in the next how-to.